Freedom of choice is a cornerstone of any healthy democracy, and yet for the last 100 years, this freedom has been under attack. The prevalent myth is that we only have two choices in any given election. This myth leaves a large percentage of the population feeling that they are not being adequately represented. Unfortunately, traditional media perpetuates this myth by refusing to let the voices of any other parties be heard. The fact that they are even on the ballot is overlooked and censored. This kind of gatekeeping is precisely why we felt it necessary to hold this debate, to allow the public access to all of their options and to give voice to the candidates who are otherwise ignored.
The Minnesota Third-Party Gubernatorial Debate. Brought to you by the Emergency Ninja Broadcast Network. MTN. Made possible by a grant from the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. And Ninja Media International. Featuring Chris Holbrook from the Minnesota Libertarian Party. Chris Wright from the Minnesota Grassroots Party. VJ Mock Fox. DJ Shannon Blowtorch. With a performance by Brian Herb and the outstanding achievements in the field of excellence. Now our host, Ian Rands.
Hey everybody, my name is Ian Rands. Welcome down to the show. To begin this debate, each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, to give us a little bit of information about themselves. And now, the fun part, the rules. We will then have 3 sections of questions, each section containing 3 questions. The candidate will have 2 minutes to answer and then an additional 1 minute to respond to their counterpart's answer. Don't worry, it gets complicated. We'll take care of it for you. After the 3rd round of questions, each candidate will then have another 2 minutes to give their closing remarks and tell us why we should vote for them. Since this debate is a timed event, we will be using a flag system, much like semaphore, to keep everything moving along. Page 2. When it's your turn to answer, we will start the 2-minute timer, and then the flag will change to green. When you have 30 seconds left, yes, the flag will then turn to yellow. Finally, at the 2-minute mark, the flag will change to red, and we will move to the next candidate. These same rules will apply for your 1-minute rebuttal. If we're all in agreement, candidate number 1, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Ian. I'm Chris Wright with the Grassroots Legalized Cannabis Party. I'm 57 years old. I have a daughter. I am the owner-operator of Genesis Computers. I went to Washburn High School, went to the U of M, went to Northwestern Electronics Institute. I ran for Congress in 1988, and against Martin Sabo. I ran for governor against Jesse and Skip Humphrey and Norm Coleman in 1998. And I ran for governor in 2010 against Mark Dayton and Tom Emmer. I put on 27 marijuana rallies at the Capitol, and I've co-founder of the Grassroots Party for 10 years. I headed up Normal, Minnesota, and I have basically 4 top issues. I want to legalize marijuana, cannabis. I want to end the drug war, the new Jim Crow. I'd like to make Minnesota energy independent through a process known as biomass gasification. And I'd like to end corporate personhood, the buying, selling, and renting of politicians. And I'd like to thank you for inviting us here today. My running mate is David Daniels. We have Judith Schwarzbacher, who's running for state auditor as well, so I want to mention both their names. And and I just want to say, I used to be here at MTN and put on a show called THC, the Hemp Channel, from 95 to 98.
Great, you've ran against all of the bests and Norm Coleman. That's spectacular. All right, candidate number 2, introduce yourself, please.
Well, thanks, Ian. Thanks, Val, Troy, for having us here today. My name's Chris Holbrook. I'm the gubernatorial candidate for the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. My running mate is Chris Stock for Lieutenant Governor. Myself, I live in St. Paul with my wife Angie. We have been there 11 years. We have no children, just a normal guy with a job. You know, I have to balance my budget, have a few investment properties, but no big government political crony, lifetime experience in that regard. Somewhat of a newcomer. I'm running for office. The best way to say it is I'm sick of sitting down on my couch, having my rights taken away from me, which I hope everyone is. The individual rights that you have need to be defended from being steamrolled by the supposed public good of the collective. That's why I'm running. That's why I'm getting involved. I want you and me, Chris, everyone, to live in freedom, economic freedom and social freedom. What do I mean by that? My platform, it's pretty simple. I call it legalize and minimize. When I'm talking about minimize, I'm talking about the economic freedoms. My agenda is to cut the budget by 10% immediately, right off the bat. That will save each Minnesota income earner $550 a year. I also intend to replace the income tax, both corporate and individual, with a fair tax. On the legalized side, I agree with Mr. Wright. We need to end the war on drugs and the prohibition on marijuana, also end the prohibition on Sunday liquor sales, and end the prohibition on fireworks. You should be able to do whatever you want that doesn't hurt somebody else.
All right, very good. We have our third candidate here from the Independence Party, Hannah Nicollet, who we offered this seat to. She didn't want to show up. Yeah. So it goes. All right, so let's start with you, Mr. Wright. Question one, how do you combat the concept that third-party candidates are just dividers?
Well, I noticed this. You can't change the status quo by voting for the status quo. Gives them no reason to change. Well, let's give them a reason to change. Don't vote for them. Most of these guys are corporate sellouts to the special interests. They support the Reagan racist war on drugs and the mass incarceration police state. I don't see why anyone would want to vote for them. They call us sometimes spoilers. Well, I kind of like the name refresher myself. And, they seem to have some kind of feeling that they are entitled to office. And every vote is a vote for that's earned by that individual. I really think that, you can waste your vote voting for one of these guys. They have more allegiance to money and to the special interests than they do to you. And I don't see any reason to waste your vote on them. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say on that.
All right, Mr. Holbrook?
Well, he makes some good points. I would also add, and we'll get to some points where we disagree, so don't think this is going to be a big love fest. Unless he's got some party favors in his coat pocket. I already asked, he doesn't. He's totally right. If you vote for a third party, you are exercising your conscience. That is never a waste. It's never a waste to act, to vote in something you believe in. The big parties will tell you it is. I feel the big parties are, as I said earlier, steamrolling all of us on our rights, on our freedoms, on our money. Like Thomas Paine once wrote, government in its best form is a necessary evil, in its worst form, an intolerable one. I believe we're to the point of lack of tolerance. I would propose also, and this was a great discussion I had actually on Up and Adam with Jack and Ben on Friday, which you can find on my website, chrisholbrook.org. the replay of that, thank you. That ranked choice voting needs to be applied at a state level, which basically means if there's 4 candidates on the ballot and the guy you vote for comes in 4th place, that gets scratched and your second choice gets your vote. So if I vote for Chris and he comes in 4th out of 4 candidates, and I vote for Mark Dayton 2nd, then my vote gets awarded to Mark Dayton. They're doing this in Minneapolis. I believe they've proposed or started to do it in St. Paul. On a state level, that will ensure that you're not wasting your vote. So that's a solution I would propose. I'm the only candidate who is basically trying to reduce government, the size of government, make government smaller. I need all the votes I can get to do that, so I need your vote. I need people to get outside of the box of, like he said, enshrining big government.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And this actually kind of deals with this. You're talking about your own parties, and we're starting with you this time, Mr. Holbrook. Why the Libertarian Party?
For me?
Yeah. Well, or why, sell it?
Well, I'll tell you, as I've told this story a couple times, I've never joined or belonged to a party before. I've always been active. I've been a donor. I've gone to rallies. I've signed petitions. I've knocked on doors. During the Kurt Bill's campaign for U.S. Senate a couple of years ago, I was at a rally at O'Gara's in St. Paul, basically because I really liked his economic message of reducing spending, reducing taxation. I like the idea of citizen legislators. He's a teacher coming to basically do his role in government and then go back to his profession. What I didn't like were some of his supporters demanding that I vote to ban gay marriage, which was the issue of the day. That really got me fired up, that they were trying to impose morality and ethics, which I believe government has no place doing. I'm very liberal socially, but I'm very conservative economically. I came to find the Libertarian Party believes in those same things. So I actually officially joined the party about 18 months ago for the first time ever, becoming a member, and that's the voice of small government, the only voice of small government that is going to protect your individual rights, which need protecting.
Great. Mr. Wright, same question. Why the Grassroots Party?
Well, we started the Grassroots Party in 1986. We ran Derek Grimmer for Attorney General as a way to fight against the Reagan drug war that was going on at the time. And it was a way to fight for freedom at that time for me, and I joined up with Normal and these guys, and we managed to get a little spark. This was the only no one else was going for legalization at the time. The Libertarians, that it wasn't their main issue. It wasn't until maybe just recently that I've noticed that they've really made it a central part of their issue. However, they always had legalization as part of their platform ever since I can remember. However, we have to fight this repression. Prohibition is manifestly destructive of civil liberties, and especially like the Fourth Amendment. The law is racist in origin and in practice. I mean, we right now it's one of those things where if we don't end the drug war, no one's going to. All the races are having a problem with the. Anyway, we're jailing a lot of minorities,
Mm-hmm.
and they can't get jobs, they can't get housing, they can't get education, they can't do all these things. This is part of the war on drugs.
Okay, Mr. Wright, thank you. And asking to defend your party, you brought up the Libertarian Party quite a lot. I'd like to give you a minute to respond.
He did, thank you, and I raised a hand because I wasn't sure how to engage in contradiction and contrast here with the rules you've set in place. It's a very structured debate. But he corrected himself. The Libertarian Party has always stood for your personal rights, your personal freedoms. So I just wanted to point that out. So,
Great.
There.
Look at that.
There.
It is beginning to be a bit of a laugh fest, though. I mean, let's be honest here.
Yeah.
All right. Section number 1. Question number 3. Choose one thing that Mark Dayton has done during his stint as governor. Why was that decision wrong, and what would have you done differently? I throw this to Mr. Wright.
Well, first of all, it's the biggest thing I can see is this medical marijuana issue. He basically, of course, those who rational change is always opposed by those who profit from maintaining the status quo, and of course, he got his support from the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, and he promised that he would not sign a medical marijuana law without their support. And so basically, he has their head, Dennis Flaherty, writing a medical marijuana bill in the state. Well, they were trying desperately to keep any kind of medical marijuana law from actually happening. And what eventually happened was they, all these, Sanjay Gupta and all of them come out and mention look at all the cannabidiol oils that work for kids that have epilepsy and for these other diseases, and the parents are screaming, hey, my kid needs this, they're going through several hundred seizures a day, and they use the cannabidiol oil, and now they're down to nothing, or down to a couple of seizures. And so eventually he had to go for it. And so they made a law that we don't know if they'll ever be able to implement it. It's sort of like the THC Therapeutic Act that never got implemented, even though we supposedly had medical marijuana in the state. So, and the big gaffe that he had, of course, when he said, well, get your marijuana on the street, he said to the people.
Which isn't a bad way to do it historically.
It's not taxed that way.
No, it's not. Come on. All right, moving on to you, Mr. Holbrook. Same question. Choose one thing that Mark Dayton has done during his stint as governor, and why was his decision wrong, and what would you have done differently?
Can I choose more than one? Does it have to be just one?
You could. It wouldn't follow the question, though.
How dare I?
Yeah, I know, right?
I'll stay within my 2 minutes, or I'll try to. Again, not a real exciting debate to agree with your opponent all the time, but that's probably the biggest mistake recently I've seen. That original medical marijuana bill that the legislature was going to pass would have helped 33,000 Minnesotans. What he did was threaten to veto it until they stripped out treatment eligibilities for soldiers with PTSD and chronic pain care, which removed about 25,000 individuals from accessibility to using medical marijuana. When he said, told the mother to go buy it on the street, it's really ironic. Right now, there's a case going on against Angela Brown for doing exactly that, getting cannabis oil to treat her son with seizures. Now the state's bringing charges against them. If anyone gets on this, hears this before that case gets resolved, go sign the petition to free or drop the charges against Angela Brown. I would say on top of that, there's been other things where Mark Dayton has ceded control to the police. We're not in a police state here in Minnesota. We don't want to be. We don't want our controls dictated or our behaviors dictated to us by the police. He vetoed the fireworks bill, which I'm a big fan of fireworks. I like blowing shit up.
Yeah.
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Some fireworks, some firecrackers.
Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
Blowing
We
shit
like
up.
to blow shit
Yeah,
up.
let's do it. I'm in.
He says go. He says go to Wisconsin and buy your fireworks. Same thing with Sunday liquor sales, which he recently stripped out the ability for off sale, with Teamster support on his side, social conservatives. So he's made a bunch of restrictions on your civil rights. So I kind of lump that together as the things that offend me the most about Mark Dayton's actions.
Okay. Great. And now we jump into section 2. And since we've been doing nothing but talking about weed, let's start there. We realize, and this is, I assume, kind of a rarity, we actually have two people on the dais that both are pro-legalization of pot. And starting with you, Mr. Holbrook, how is your approach to taxation and regulation different than the Grassroots Party?
To be honest, I have no idea how they're different. I'm assuming we agree totally on legalization of marijuana for medical and recreational use. It will provide industrial solutions. It will provide jobs. It will decrease crime. It will demilitarize the police. There are so many things that are going to be fixed. We are draining our resources right now. We're throwing people in jail because we think they have marijuana. there's a great saying, I think it's by Willie Nelson or someone. It says
He's a great
marijuana.
libertarian
Yeah,
poet.
he's a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
or Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
It says marijuana doesn't destroy your life. The police destroy your life when they catch you with marijuana.
Yeah.
That is 100% accurate. So the experiments going on in Colorado and Washington right now, the statistics are showing that crime is decreasing, tax revenue is increasing. It's not this Pandora's box of craziness. I think its time has come. This discussion is long past due. Full steam ahead.
Okay. Mr. Wright, same question to you. How would your approach to taxation regulation be different than the Libertarian Party?
Well, for one thing, I believe in a progressive tax policy, not a regressive tax policy, and also, I'd like to point out that in Article 13, Section 7 of the Minnesota Constitution, it says, any person may sell or peddle the products of the farm or garden occupied and cultivated by him without obtaining a license therefor. So, marijuana and cannabis were widely grown in 1906 when this was adopted into the Constitution, and frankly, I think that cannabis should already be legal under the law, and that you shouldn't be taxed for those products of your market garden. And so, other things, for instance, I think that we could save a lot in taxes. For instance, in the medical area, for instance, imagine we spend 9 to 10 billion bucks a year on medical in the state, and yet we found here that 10% of all medical billing is usually overbilled, and so we could save probably, through fraud and abuse. We're double billed and all this stuff. We could save probably $1 billion bucks. It's 80% of all healthcare bills are overbilled, and we could certainly save a lot of money for the state by ending the bilking of our people.
So, and let me make sure I have this right. You would be against taxing marijuana, and to make up for that perceived loss, which they're having the boon for in Colorado, you would tighten up shop on medical billing.
I certainly wouldn't oppose a tax if the legislature put it across my desk. I'd want to get cannabis legalized.
You wouldn't pose
but
a
for
tax rate
but for the farmer to grow it, no. For someone to resell it, maybe them, but not the farmer himself who sells it to, let's say, the local mill.
Of course, the old weed mill. Yeah. All right. And Mr. Holbrook, I have you. Would you? I don't even know what alcohol and cigarettes, what the rate is for that presently. But ballpark me a number here. What do you think you would tax marijuana at? Let's say $20 purchase.
You want to get into taxes.
I'm just looking for a brief, to wrap it up.
It would be the same rate on all products.
Okay.
So right now our sales tax is 6.875%.
Okay.
If you taxed all products, all products, I'm talking clothing too, which I know isn't popular here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But you could lower the rate on all products, including the astronomical excise taxes on, the sin taxes, cigarettes, alcohol. Colorado, I don't know what they're charging, 35% tax.
Okay.
I think it's insane.
Yeah.
I'm a proponent of a fair tax, which is flat on all goods consumed, including marijuana. I'm also a big proponent of doing stuff out of your house, home brewing. I like to make my own beer, so I don't have to pay beer tax.
Of course.
I buy foods, which aren't taxed. Same thing if you're growing marijuana, like he said, on the farm, in your garden. I had a question yesterday. Someone asked me, are you going to tax use of marijuana? Not use. Resale, sure.
Yeah.
But at a flat rate. Last thing I did want to add, I also suggest pardoning everyone who has a victimless crime on their record for drug felonies. If you haven't hurt someone, your record should be expunged immediately. I would I would do that immediately.
Okay. All right. Well, we wrap that up. And I didn't ask you about growing opium. Congratulations. I really wanted to. All right. Question number 2. And this has actually been kind of a hot button question between those of us who've been working on the questions because it seems kind of illogical. Doesn't seem entirely doable. But let's just act like it was because, I mean, it could be. If there were a major disaster that somehow reduced the Minnesota state budget by 80%, how would you prioritize spending? I believe last time I started with you, Mr. Wright, so I'll start with Mr. Holbrook, or did I start with you last time? I'll keep it moving. Well,
so
I'll start with you
we
now.
would-
You look like you're ready to answer. Do it.
Sure. We're going to reduce the budget by 80%.
Yeah, if we had to basically put all of that to defense or killing Godzilla, what would we do?
Well, that's a great question. I'd first celebrate. I guess there's so many parameters, so many factors. Are you saying then we have to take more income from people? I think we could live on a greatly reduced budget than we have now. So if you're going to take 80% out of our $33 billion budget right now, that takes you down to what, 5 or 6?
Yeah, and how would you prioritize
I would
that spending?
prioritize it on what I believe the role of government is. Roads, bridges, necessities, safety nets for people. So I guess those are some of the few things I think government should really have their hand on. It would resemble more spontaneous order that the Libertarian Party platform is, which is basically the role of government is to enforce contracts and protect rights. I would love it if we had to live on 1/5 of what we live now, so that's all the responsibilities the government was taking care of.
As in the state government, not federal.
State government.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That answer was a little soft on Godzilla.
Really?
We could have. All right, and this one goes to you, Mr. Wright. If there were a major disaster, Godzilla related, let's say, and it reduced the state budget by 80%, how would you prioritize the remaining 20% to be spent?
Well, you're talking about some kind of natural disaster or war or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I believe the purpose of government is to promote and protect the public health, safety, and the general welfare. And so, first of all, I would make sure that people got fed, and people had some kind of a roof over their head, and that they were protected from crime, and from marauders and so on, until order could be restored. And there are. I'm sure there must be some kind of contingency plan. I heard that Rudy Perpich didn't have a plan for if there was a nuclear disaster here in the state when Gorbachev came to town there, but apparently they did try the walleye over at the cafe there in St. Paul, but. We would certainly have to maintain some kind of social order, and that would probably involve the use of the state guard and so on.
Okay.
There is
and you have
no
1
way.
minute. You have a 1 minute rebuttal.
There's no way you can feed and house 5.5 million people if the budget is reduced 80%. It's just not possible.
Well, yeah, if you take it to that extent, yes.
Well, but that's what Mr. Wright's proposing. Mm-hmm. That's a pipe dream to say, well, I would make sure everyone's fed. People can feed themselves. They know how to grow food. You should be able to sustain an existence without the government providing you food or shelter. That's something that is not in the Constitution of the United States or of Minnesota, that the government's job is to make sure you have food and you have a house. That's a big government option, a big government solution. It's to be honest, somewhat of a fascist tenet, and I reject that notion.
So if we did have a major disaster like that, and I assume most of those funds would be federal anyway, would you turn away FEMA?
It's hard to,
that's
say without knowing
big government
what,
coming to your backyard trying to bail you out. Was that something you would turn away
if you're getting assistance, you wouldn't turn that away. I wouldn't turn that away. But if you're saying your resources have been depleted by 80%, you have to prioritize. Ensuring people's protection is far more of a priority, and that's from each other, that's from the government, that's
So you're
from
saying
Russia or whatever the attacker, invader is, whatever your situation is you're talking about.
So you would put it towards then, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm reading it then, and it would go towards police. If
Well,
you're looking to protect.
sustaining public safety, yeah, it would be the first priority.
So, okay, right, good. Question number 3, everybody. This one deals with MNsure. You thought it was over. It's not. We're still talking about it. Preferred One, they just announced that they are pulling out of the MNsure project due to the cost of a significant amount of resources to administer, essentially forcing 60% of that market to reapply. Please explain your stance on the MNsure program and what it means to voters, and I will throw this to you, Mr. Wright.
Well, myself, I think we should opt out of the Affordable Care Act and implement a single-payer health care. I think that we could reduce the cost of health care for the consumer by half. We could end all this incredible fraud and bilking that's going on right now of our health care system. And boy, there's a big crime of overbilling. At the least, what we should have is we should be able to know all the costs of health care from the hospitals, so that they're not double billing us, and the healthcare providers and the insurers, that at least we should know all the costs so that we can make informed consumer decisions. And this is something that's not going on right now. Actually, Obamacare has added more, different points there that actually sometimes increases the cost. And so at that point, then we could cover everyone, and we could end this fraud.
Okay, goes to you, Mr. Holbrook.
With all due respect, Mr. Wright, you are totally out to lunch on that solution. The state being the only option for your health care is not going to drive down costs, it will drive up costs. That's a situation that's going on right now. When government takes over an industry, you have less choice, you have less quality, and you have higher costs. The way to get lower costs, more accessibility, is to have more competition. That only happens when the government gets out of it, not when the government takes 100% control. The MNsure program, it's fascinating, the debacle that Governor Dayton has turned Obamacare into in our state. We're one of only, five to 10 states took the option of creating their own exchange in place of using the federal program. The catch to that is you are responsible for the fiscal sustainability of that every year thereafter. Our costs on that are going to be $50 million a year. That's got to come out of our pockets here in Minnesota. The startup costs of this website have already been $150 million. They say there's another $12 to $15 million to fix it. This is in the first year of setting it up. It's still not working. Preferred One just pulled out. As Mark Dayton actually intelligently said, that's the free market working right there. They can't sustain the low costs that we're paying them, so they're pulling out. The beauty of a free market system is if you want to find a lower cost or better quality, you have that option. If the government is the only provider, you don't have any options. You don't have anywhere else to go. So I entirely reject a single-payer system.
Okay, do you have a...
I would like to rebut that because, of course, right now we do have a bit of a free market system. It's been going on ever since even before Obamacare, and the costs have been enormous. In Canada, they have a single payer system. They pay half of what we pay, and they have better outcomes. They have choice of doctor. They have choice of facilities. They also have lower costs on their prescription drugs.
They don't have better outcomes. They have longer waiting times. People in Canadian and European models come to America to get the best treatment. And we don't have anywhere close to a free market.
I mean, that's cool to say, but I mean, like, where do you get that information from? I mean, like, what Canadian or European have you
BBC
seen
World
come to
News.
Minnesota?
I mean, you can pull up I forget the name of the British healthcare system, that basically, all the Republican scare tactics of death squads or death panels. Yeah. They actually have to, the only way you get costs down if the government's running it, which is in these newspaper articles, is to eliminate services. And if you're an elderly person, you need an expensive service, the government's going to decide, well, we need to control costs, so you're not going to get that service. That's proven. I'd be happy to find some. I didn't bring any references. I didn't know we were going to get this detailed into it. But the notion that the government is going to drive down the cost by paying people less is a disaster. Okay. And it's actually, we haven't had the ability to shop across state lines. It's been a very restricted crony market. It has not been free market at all.
Okay. All right, moving on to our third section here, and I'll be starting with you, Mr. Holbrook. Name 2 things that you would like to implement to make Minnesota a more viable place for new business.
The first thing I would like to implement or de-implement is the corporate income tax of 9.8%. That makes us the 3rd highest state in the nation on business tax rate. It's driving corporations out of the state. Medtronic, obviously, that's also combined with the federal corporate rate of 35%, highest in the world. We've lost Advanced Auto, DPMS. The corporate income tax in Minnesota brings in about $1.4 billion, represents approximately 4% of the state budget. I'll trade that income for jobs for Minnesotans. So that would be the first thing I would do right off the bat. Second thing I would do is eliminate income taxes on people. Converting incrementally to a fair tax system, that will put $1,200 a year back in your pocket that the government won't be seizing from you. That right there is the best way to grow the economy in Minnesota. If you have more money in your pocket, you can spend it, save it, pay down debt, give it away. There's not this notion that the money's just going to evaporate. The money is going to stay in the system, but I believe you are a smarter user of your money than the government. Those are my 2 implementations.
Okay, Mr. Wright, same question.
And that's to increase business.
Yeah, all right, I'll reread it. Yeah, I was being lazy. You caught me.
Well,
name 2 things that you would do to implement to make Minnesota a more viable place for new businesses.
Well, certainly I agree that we could certainly help out the small business owners with reduced taxes, because they are the ones who hire the most people. And the way we get, we need to have demand, and demand is money. And so if people have more money in their hands, then they can spend it. One way we can do this and to deal with a very difficult problem we have right now. Right now, global warming is the most serious environmental thing that's going on right now, that's facing the humanity. And I have a plan to make Minnesota energy independent through biomass gasification, a way to turn biomass into liquid fuels, substitute for natural gas, and substitute for coal. And by doing this, we can provide refinery jobs, we can provide farm jobs, we can make Minnesota energy independent, keep the money in Minnesota, and we can, eventually be able to start working our way towards dealing with our transportation infrastructure, which would also help us to expand jobs and help out business by having a world-class infrastructure. The other thing, of course, is education, and I probably don't have enough time to talk about that, but certainly I believe in a better education system than we have right now.
Okay, so more of a New Deal model, more in the FDR, make government make businesses, or or bring jobs.
Government can help improve business by helping provide education and infrastructure. And one of those infrastructures I was mentioning was the biomass gasification.
Yeah. And Mr. Holbrook, since I asked to follow up to him, I'd also like to ask one to you. Since you're talking about cutting all of the taxes to make smaller government. Where exactly does smaller government, I mean, I know this is a big question, we'll give you a minute on it, but I mean, where exactly does small government come from? I mean, who gets cut? What branches are we getting rid of?
Well, to be honest, I'm not in the government right now, so I don't have all the answers. I don't have a
just broad
complete
strokes.
audit. In broad strokes, the money wasted on trying to regulate health insurance, the subsidies for energy, some of the programs he's talking about are going to require massive amounts of stimulus spending, like the subsidies on ethanol and oil. Ridiculous. We don't need to be paying businesses. They'll either make it or die on their own, to be honest. There are a ton of projects that can be cut right out of the gate. A $90 million Senate building in St. Paul, when they're doing a $240 million renovation of the Capitol right now, which houses all 67 part-time senators just fine. $1.6 billion Southwest Light Rail System, basically being thrown on top of people by the Met Council, which is an unconstitutional body. Hey, let's get rid of the Met Council. That's $800 million a year right there, just for their salaries.
Yeah.
There are a litany of things.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, moving on to question number 2 from section 3. In light of most recent events in Ferguson, Missouri, please discuss your view on police accountability and to the community they serve, and whether or not you think such measures, such as personal cameras on officers, are a good idea. Mr. Wright, we will start with you, please.
Well, you know, it was in 1981 that Ronald Reagan passed the Military Cooperation with Civilian Law Enforcement Agencies Act, which allowed the military to give military assistance and equipment to law enforcement free of charge. And of course, they first used it, one of the first big times they used it was in the raid on Mount Carmel and the Branch Davidians, David Koresh. The ATF falsely claimed that he had a meth lab, when in fact he did not. And it led to the deaths of 82 Branch Davidians and 4 ATF agents. And likewise, you know, the law enforcement support office of the military is providing, you know, military equipment that was used in Ferguson, Missouri there. Most of these SWAT teams are used to serve drug warrants and arrests in minority neighborhoods. And you know, they've treated instead of protect and serve, they're treating the public as the enemy. And well, of course, the war on drugs is a war on us, isn't it? And this is what has happened because of this Reagan racist war on drugs. So that's my take on it.
Okay, Mr. Holbrook, question to you, and I'll reread the whole thing. In light of events most recently highlighted in Ferguson, Missouri, please discuss your view on police accountability and to the community they serve, and whether or not you think such measures, measures such as personal cameras on the officers, are a good idea.
I'm a big fan of cameras on police. Quick history, we were talking about this earlier. My campaign actually got kickstarted by me getting arrested for petitioning in a public park. No lie. And it's videotaped, it's online. That wouldn't have been brought to light if I wasn't filming it. I 100% believe all police should be filmed. And people say, well, would you want to be filmed at your job? You know what? My job doesn't allow me the use of excessive force on another person. If it did, yeah, I should be filmed. They are public servants. They're not serving the public when they're intimidating and harassing. The militarization of police right now is a huge problem. I think it's setting us up for a really dark day. There's no reason. If I become governor, I would reject all these gifts from the Pentagon of military hardware. There's no reason for Royalton, Minnesota, population 1,200, to have a grenade launcher. There's no reason for Pine City to have an MRAP. There's no reason for St. Cloud to have an armored Humvee. These things aren't necessary. They're an intimidation tactic. Now, I'm not saying all police are bad. I'm not throwing the police under the bus. But when you get new toys, you want to use them. I like fireworks, like I said earlier. If you give me a grenade launcher, I'm going to find somewhere to launch a grenade.
As we all would.
Yeah, who wouldn't? How can you resist? So I just think there's no place for it in our public servants' hands. Like Mr. Wright said, I'm going to go back to agreeing with him. It's basically a war against the people. They're supposed to be helping and protecting our rights, not taking them from us.
Okay. Only one more question to go here. Last one of the evening. And we'll start with Mr. Holbrook on this one. And it's a tough one. In your opinion, what is the best thing about the state of Minnesota?
The best thing about the state of Minnesota is the diversity. I love diversity. That's why I live in the city. There are dozens of ethnicities, income levels, people who are mean, people who are nice, people who like sports, people who like art. There's so many things to do. You can find everything in Minnesota, whether you're a lover of the outdoors, whether you're a lover of the indoors. We have a lot of, covered bridges and skywalks due to that. And I really like the involvement that people take in the political process here. Maybe I bitch about it a little bit too much, or we all do, that there's not enough involvement, but we have the highest voter turnout rate in the country typically. People here, they know their rights. They know that, as Thomas Jefferson would say, the power of government comes from the consent of the governed, and if it becomes destructive of liberty, the people's right is to alter it. People get involved and alter it. Like you pointed out, Ian, in your opening comments, we've done that 4 times, I believe, elected independent governors. So that's the thing I love about living here is the exuberance for life, the involvement in life in all aspects that Minnesotans show.
All right, Mr. Wright, your turn. What is your favorite thing about the great state of Minnesota? The big flag behind you here.
Of course, the best thing about the state of Minnesota is the people. We got, there, although it's overstated, I suppose, Minnesota nice, but boy, I'll tell you, I know some pretty nice people here, and we have a really great state with, we got great farmland, and we got great natural resources, and we, things that I would certainly like to expand upon is like I'm interested in a old growth restoration project that would restore 51% of state lands with old growth like we used to have back in the day. But we got great parks. We got really an educated population, although I wish we could do more about that also. But we're competitive. We can do a lot of things. But one thing is for sure is we got a much better team than the Packers.
All right, everybody. And we do have an audience behind us. Round of applause for Mr. Holbrook and Mr. Wright from the Grassroots Party and Libertarian Party, respectively. Again, my name is Ian Rands. This has been the first ever third-party gubernatorial debate right here, brought to you by our friends at MTN and the Emergency Ninja Broadcast Network. Thanks for tuning in. And now, hey, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Shannon Blowtorch.
Do not adjust your television. This is a message from the Emergency Ninja Broadcast Network. We understand that you have become apathetic. There is but one course of action. November 4th, leave your couch. Go to the polls and vote. The ENBN has spoken. You may now resume normal activity.
Brian Herb and his outstanding achievements in the field of excellence.
It's all too cryptic to piece it together. It's a matter of time before I'm swimming down and down to figure it out. Oh, there's something going on that I can't see. It's not about you, it's me. Figure it out for me. Well, Bob and I are the same schemes over and over. You don't even know what I'm talking about. I'm way too cynical to keep it together. Just a matter of time before I'm swimming down and down. I should figure it out. But am I somebody else or who I wanna be? It's not about you, it's me. Figure it out for me. Well, honey, when you wake up, I'm in the trouble. How really I've done myself this time. You know what I did last night in my dream. Dark kisses and peaceful crying. I can't explain it away, so I won't even bother. Lay down the door, but I'm not coming in. Arbitrary words, arbitrary lines. On a schedule, but I can't tell you when. Gonna figure it out on my own. I wrote you a letter to say goodbye. You know I gotta learn to make up my mind. I'm way too frightened to look it forever. Nobody gets an unlimited amount of time to figure it out for me. Or is there something going on that I can't see? It's not about you, it's me. You can't figure it out for me. You know you can't figure it out for me. You can't figure it out for me. You know you gotta figure it out on my own.
Home November 4th. It's not your responsibility. Nothing is your fault. Things are fine the way they are. Go ahead and complain. But no matter what you do, don't vote. The Emergency Ninja Broadcast Network.
Freedom of choice is a cornerstone of any healthy democracy, and yet for the last 100 years, this freedom has been under attack. The prevalent myth is that we only have two choices in any given election. This myth leaves a large percentage of the population feeling that they are not being adequately represented. Unfortunately, traditional media perpetuates this myth by refusing to let the voices of any other parties be heard. The fact that they are even on the ballot is overlooked and censored. This kind of gatekeeping is precisely why we felt it necessary to hold this debate, to allow the public access to all of their options and to give voice to the candidates who are otherwise ignored.
Thank you to the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits and MTN, the Minneapolis Television Network.
We neither own it nor do we control it, and you can use it for anything you like, forever. We neither own it nor do we control it, and you can use it for anything you like, forever. We neither own it nor do we control it, and you can use it for anything you like, forever. neither own it nor do we control it, and you can use it for anything you like, forever. We neither own it nor do we control it, and you can use it for anything you like, forever.
The Emergency Ninja Broadcast Network.